Welcome to Self-Love Actually, a podcast that will provide guidance and support along your self-love journey. I'm your host, Haley Curtis, a self-love life coach who helps people better love themselves by creating a life they dream of living. My purpose in creating this podcast is that it allows you to love yourself a little more, each and every episode. Today's guest is Larisa Dalton. Larisa is a certified life coach who specializes in self-esteem and confidence. She works with clients in a one-on-one and group setting to raise their self-worth, analyze their inner critic, and grow self-compassion to build confidence. Outside of coaching, Larisa loves spending time with her beautiful family, reading books, spending time in nature, cooking, traveling, and painting. Larisa and I were introduced through a friend and really connected on our shared love for personal development. We also have a very similar journey of leaving the corporate world to follow our heart into a career of serving others. Larisa is a very special person, and I'm so excited for you to listen to our conversation today. Larisa, welcome.
Thank you. So happy to be here.
We're happy to have you here too. And before we get into it, I want our listeners to know a little bit more about you and your background. So if you could tell us a little bit about how you became a confidence coach and why you chose this path.
I joined sort of the coaching arena after COVID has launched initially. In the year of 2020, I started my certification process and was discovering everything coaching. When I started my practice, my initial focus was on loss. At that time, I'd lost my job. My oldest was leaving for college. My dad got sick with cancer, and it just seemed like loss was such an appropriate thing to focus on. I've gone on a journey. I've found a way to deal with these losses. Beginning of the year, my daughter moves back because, they were pretty much isolated, so I got her back. And as a result, our relationship strengthened so much because now we both appreciated each other so much more. My dad overcame cancer and I discovered coaching, and it was the best thing because in coaching, I found my true passion, my true purpose. So then I'm looking at my circumstances and thinking, wow, this loss is not as deep as it was initially. At the same time, I'm having a conversation with somebody and they point out to me that my self-esteem is kind of low, I started thinking about it and I realized that I really didn't know much about what self-esteem was and what it does. There was some pain there, and I realized that I needed to learn what that was about. That's what launched my self-esteem and confidence. I recognized what I was missing. And so today I feel so empowered. I feel in such a better place today than I did at that time.
It's so interesting that a stranger really changed the course of your life in that way.
When he mentioned that or just kind of challenged that, I literally, my face remained motionless, but just tears came down my face because I knew it connected with the deeper parts of me, and I could have taken offense to it.
Right.
But instead I decided to see there's definitely a connection there. And I'm so happy that I did.
Like you said, you could have taken offense to it, but because you didn't take offense to it, it tells me you've done a lot of work to get to that point and to be open to feedback about yourself, open to improve yourself. And, an instinct could have been oh, no, you're wrong, shut them down. But it's really neat that you were open to receiving pretty tough feedback about yourself and took action into actually changing and impacting your life and now impacting other people's lives.
When you say tough feedback, I feel like that is a very common thing that people feel when self-esteem is brought up, that there's some kind of shame and guilt about it. Because people that have low self-esteem experience shame and guilt. And so when self-esteem is brought up, there's those feelings definitely there. But I just want people to know that it's not shame and guilt. It's simply lacking knowledge and focus to develop that part of you because you can.
Absolutely. Would you mind defining confidence and self-worth and telling us the difference between the two.
So confidence usually refers to a belief in a person's ability. It's related to competency and self-efficacy. As your competence increases, your confidence increases. So for example, you have a job, you go to your job every day, you learn the ins and outs, you go to work, you feel pretty confident. You don't need to ask anybody for help. You don't need to look for instructions. Like, you're pretty confident. The problem with confidence is that if we base feelings of worth on competence and achievement, we fail. There is no worth. Worth, on the other hand, is your spiritual chords, like your spirit. When you are born, you're born with it. You are born worthy. You can't earn it, but often people try to earn their worth. But if you're born, you are born with it. It already exists. When we look at, for example, burning house and there's a child inside of the house and you have firefighters working to save this child, people that have contributed to the world, people that have made a difference, maybe saved other lives, yet they're risking their lives, the resources to save this child who may and probably has not contributed to the world, hasn't impacted anybody's life, hasn't made any kind of difference yet. They recognize the worth of this child as important as their own. And so it's important to look at worth through those eyes.
As you get older, the world kind of teaches you to unlearn your worth in a way. And when I think of a child, without a question, a child is worthy of anything. But it's a different story when I think of myself worthy of anything. So it seems like there's some work to be done to bridge that gap. How would one even begin to do that?
Worth is more of like intellectual thing. You have to just believe that you're born and you're born with worth. And it's hard, but affirmations could be a very powerful tool in building that belief. It's that spirit, it's that liveliness in us that makes us worthy.
Yes, absolutely. I know that a few of my clients have a difficult time detaching confidence, accomplishments from your worth. It's really something difficult to do because I feel like we were kind of raised to believe, at least in America, that it is good to work and to be successful, then you become worthy. And it's completely different than what you're explaining. You were born worthy. And you've just got to continue to see that for the rest of your life, go through all the subconscious beliefs that you've learned as you've gotten older and really analyze them and start to question them in order to really see your worth. And it sounds so simply put, but it is very difficult to kind of relearn the beliefs that you've been telling yourself your whole life.
It was very difficult for me. In my adulthood, when I started thinking about this, I realized that my beliefs were that I wasn't worthy. Like, who was I? Even if I was praying to God, I felt shame and I didn't feel sometimes that I was deserving to even pray to God,
Mm-hmm.
I had to put in a lot of new intentional beliefs around worth.
Which is when affirmations come in so handy. I know a lot of people just think that you're telling yourself nice things, but it's so much more than that, because it may be that at first, but the shift is when you actually start believing the affirmations. And that helps with reprogramming your mind and rewriting those patterns to really help you see that you've been worthy this whole time.
I think of worth as a seed. You're born with all the potential. So when I look at self-esteem, I look at it in three components: your worth, your love, and development. That makes up your self-esteem. That's why we have caregivers and parents that love us in our childhood as we develop. And that really is, in this analogy, is like the soil. You take that seed, you plant it in the soil. And then the development part, the third component, is the fruit. The fruit reflects what was inside that seed, or reflects our worth. See yourself as a seed and planted and nourished in love. And then the results that you produce is a reflection, a beautiful reflection of all the potential that was in that seed or in you.
If someone doesn't really know their worth and other people can see it so much easier, like whether it's a friend or a family member. How can one start to kind of like see what other people see in themselves?
Yeah, we have blind spots. We all do.
Mm-hmm.
We all do. That's a great time to partner up with somebody. Either it's a coach or a mentor, a friend, somebody who's going to be honest about your blind spots. But on the personal level, what you can do, and this is very simple and it's very basic, but you can start listing your strengths and weaknesses. If you're not sure what those are, ask people around you.
Mm-hmm.
Think of reasons why people come to you for help. What kind of things are people seeking in you? And typically you'd be able to come up with a good list of both. And hopefully that'll be kind of your starting point.
I feel like it could be a fun activity too for you to like kind of ask other people and also kind of reflect within yourself, and don't really put a time limit on that. You know, you don't need to do that within 5 minutes. Like this could be ongoing for a year even, or a few months. But I think that's a great way to get clear on what you're really good at. And most likely you already know what you're really good at, and you may talk it down. You know, people have already told you what you're really good at and given you compliments, and whether you've received them or kind of deflected them also may be an indicator of what you're skilled in.
Also take your unique upbringing maybe into consideration. For example, for me, I grew up in a family of 11 and I'm right in the middle. So I had to find a way to deal with my older siblings as well as my younger siblings. And so as I was building my business, group coaching was something that I was like super attracted to, but I wasn't quite sure why. And then I remembered when I looked at my upbringing that, hey, I pretty much grew up in the group.
Yeah.
I feel like a fish in the water when it comes to group coaching. I'm able to extract from people in, different parts of their lives or different places in their lives because I've done that all my life. So look at these unique things to you and see what you can do with that.
I do want to point out that there's like a line with really leaning into others to discover your worth. I know that it can become toxic. I have a memory of myself when I received compliments, I fueled that with my self-worth, which was really toxic because my worth was reliant on receiving compliments from others. And while it's a great way to figure out your strengths and weaknesses, to kind of lean in on those that are closer to you and those that already see your worth for what it is, it can also be toxic if that is the end all be all and you need a compliment in order to feel worthy.
For me, like validation was such a big thing because when you have low self-esteem, when you see yourself as really not deserving, not worthy, not good enough, then you need validation. I needed validation all the time. And you're subconsciously seeking it out because inside you need some kind of uplifting. So I think that's where self-love comes into play because it's important to develop and accept all parts of you and love that. Whenever you need something, you're able to sort of satisfy or meet your own need.
Absolutely. I feel like with the validation, just from starting my business, I felt the need to be validated all the time because I didn't know what I was doing. And I just wanted to know, like, is this right? And like, nothing's really right. It's so dependent on you and your journey. But I think one day I questioned, why do I need this? Why do I feel like I need to be validated in order to be good? And I was like, what if I'm already good? Like, what if I can validate myself? Like, if I know that I am good, then I can validate myself and tell myself I'm doing a good job. That for me was a big moment of self-love because I was able to give myself what I needed. And it took me a while to get there. And once you realize something doesn't work, you got to figure out another way that does. But a lot of times it really starts with you questioning, why am I doing this? Like, why do I need validation from others? Why do I need a compliment to feel good about myself? Why do I need to do good at work to feel good about myself? If these are things that you have experienced and you're struggling with, it is definitely possible to do on your own. But if you are looking to kind of
take this head on and tackle it at a faster pace, I highly recommend working with a coach. Larisa would be a great option. Self-love coach here would be a great option.
Yeah.
And I mean, this kind of goes hand in hand because you're right. Like if you're really able to learn your worth and give yourself what you need, that is self-love.
Another way maybe to approach it would be through compassion, because you realize like all these challenges that you've overcome. If you're a standing person, you've probably faced rejection and defeat and fears and all kinds of challenges, right? If you're an adult, you've probably experienced it all.
Mm-hmm.
And yet you're still here. Recognize yourself, appreciate yourself, and say, I'm still here.
Compassion's a beautiful act of self-love. Why is knowing your worth essential to self-love?
If you don't see yourself as valuable, as deserving, as important, why would you love yourself?
It's a great way to put it. It's so simple, but it's so true. It's like some people just feel like they're not even worthy of loving themselves.
Yeah.
But yet they were born with their worth. Like they were born worthy, and they have somehow in their life learned that they're unworthy of actually loving themselves.
Well, the good news is that there is help out there. There are steps you can take to turn that around.
And I'm hoping this podcast episode has helped a few people. It's definitely helped me.
That's awesome. That's so good.
Yes.
And for me, talking about it too, like reinforces this knowledge, helps me to just be reminded.
Yeah, absolutely. You don't hear these conversations often enough.
Yeah, I agree.
So what would be your advice for someone who's just really struggling with their self-worth and doesn't really think that they're worthy of self-love at all?
My advice is that if you're struggling, get a coach, find somebody who is going to walk you through the process if you're struggling. But if you're not able to do that, then I want to offer you, that seed analogy once again. Look at yourself as a seed with everything inside of you that you need to succeed, and start loving or embracing all parts of you. Look at yourself through the eyes of compassion. What have you overcome, and yet you're still here? Look at your perseverance, tenacity, ability to deal with all kinds of challenges of life, and yet you're still here. So start with these realizations, and hopefully that will grow for you.
That's beautiful, Larisa. Thanks so much for sharing. Now I have a few standard questions that I love asking every guest. So the first one is, what was your first memory of an act of self-love?
So the self-love phrase itself, I probably learned it just a couple of years ago. But I think for me, for the last 10, 15 years, active self-love has been just going to the mountain. Not only was it physical exercise, but it also allowed me to experience that aha moment that I was small in comparison to this big world. And it just allowed me to appreciate what was given. What about yours? I'd love to hear yours.
Mine was in 2019 when I finally started doing things for myself that I've always wanted to do, but would make excuses about. And I knew that if I did these things, it would improve the quality of my life big time. And so one day I just kind of got sick of being sick of myself.
Yeah.
And I started working out and eating healthy. And I feel like that is probably the first act that I did that was really out of love for myself. I feel like I've lived most of my life for others because I'm such a giver, and I didn't have boundaries around that. And so I lived a lot of my life just depleted. And I also didn't think I was worthy of giving to myself and loving towards myself. And it really took me to get to a point where I was just sick of it. I was like, I've had enough. Let me just do this for myself. And that kind of turned into a snowball effect to where it's a challenge now. Today, it's what else can I add to my plate that's going to better me a year from now?
Yeah, that's wonderful. I love that you got sick of being sick of yourself. Yeah. I love that.
I feel like that's what it takes sometimes.
Yeah.
you'll see other people and you want the best for them and they're not going to do anything about it until they get sick of being sick of themselves.
Yes, that's awesome.
What is your favorite self-love practice and why?
I love my morning routine. I either go to the gym or go on a quick run. And then I do visualization and I do journaling. Visualization is a new component, and I've absolutely fallen in love with visualization. It helps me to see kind of where I want to go. And that has been favorite part of my morning.
Tell me a little bit more about that, like visualization in form of like meditation or like journaling.
Yes.
Like, what is that exactly?
In form of meditation, and then I journal afterwards. So I use like a guided visualization.
Okay.
And it takes me to a place where I want to be, say, in a couple of years or in a year from now. And it allows me to essentially experience what that would be like. And so I'm developing like these feelings of excitement and appreciation and gratitude for that place sort of in the future.
I love that.
And so I'm kind of closing the gap in my own mind that becomes familiar to my body, to my brain. So it's easier for me to move in that direction. And I'm able to experience like joy and gratitude and like very positive emotions while I'm there already. Now, we do this like on the opposite spectrum all the time, right? We like relive bad memories and we feel that fear and shame and guilt. We do that all the time on the opposite spectrum, but you can also do this going forward to the place that you want to and create feelings and emotions that you want to experience. So that's been very, very powerful for me.
Yeah, that sounds powerful. I've never like thought to do that or kind of came across that practice before. Well, Larisa, we are coming to a close for this episode. I feel like it's just what people needed to hear. I know that I got a lot from it. And it's just a conversation that more people need to hear and talk about and just have more awareness around. So where can people find you and follow you?
First of all, thank you so much for having me. And thank you for seeing the value in this conversation. I think that feeling good about yourself is so important. You can find me on Instagram, Larisa_Dalton.
Awesome. And yes, Larisa and I have a podcast episode together. She had me on her podcast, which is called Diaries of a Life Coach. So if you enjoyed this conversation, definitely go check out Diaries of a Life Coach after this. And most importantly, like, how can people work with you?
So I do one-on-one coaching. And I also have group coaching that I launch every quarter, and you do it in the group setting. So it's incredibly powerful. So those are the two ways of working with me.
Awesome. And how can someone kind of get started with that? Do they just message you on Instagram or go to your website?
Just go to my Instagram, follow me. You can just DM me, or you can actually book a free 30-minute session where we can connect and talk about what options are and how we can get started.
Awesome. I'll make sure to link all those resources below in the show notes. So make sure to connect with Larisa on Instagram. And thank you so much for joining us today, Larisa. This was great.
Thank you so much for listening, self-lovers. If you enjoyed this episode, please let me know by leaving a review and subscribing to this podcast. And if you really loved it, please share this episode with a friend. This episode wouldn't have been possible without our production partner, Pinto Media. Making this podcast has been so easy with their help. If you're thinking of starting a podcast on your own, check out their page on Instagram at produced_by_Pinto, Pinto. If you're ready to level up your self-love game outside of this podcast, you can book a free clarity call with me to see if we would be a good fit for one another. I help my clients achieve their goals fueled by self-love. You can head to my website, HaleyCurtis.com, or check out the show notes below. If you have any suggestions or feedback for me about future episodes, please email me at hello@HaleyCurtis.com or DM me on Instagram at @IamHaleyCurtis. I really want to make sure that these episodes best serve you. That is it for today, self-lovers. I will meet you again on our next episode.